All right, we're going to start chapter 11, which is on cell communication, specifically signal transduction. So basically, cells need to be able to talk to each other. They need to be able to coordinate things, to work together, like in organs, or to grow, or to send signals, or to fight disease. So cells have to be able to communicate. It is essential for all organisms, both multicellular and unicellular organisms. So biologists have discovered some kind of universal mechanisms of cellular regulation. Okay, cells most often communicate with each other via chemical signals. So chemicals are either transported directly from cell to cell, or they're secreted to other cells. And you may have heard of like the fight or flight response. Is that's what, like, kind of, let's say you see a bear and you are ready to run away from the bear, and you get all like up and excited, and that's the fight or flight response. And it's triggered by a signaling molecule called epinephrine. It's triggered by one of these signal transduction pathways. Okay, so when they were first studying cell communication, kind of evolution of cell communication, they looked at small microbes, glimpse into the role of cell signaling in the evolution of life as we know it. So if you look at yeast, it's a unicellular eukaryote. So this is a Saccharomyces cerevisiae, is a type of yeast, and it has two mating types, type A and type alpha. And cells of different mating types have to come together, and they locate each other because they don't have like a GPS or eyes or anything like that, by secreting factors that are specific to each mating type. These factors use a signal transduction pathway, and this is going to be a thing. So signal transduction pathway, which is a series of steps by which a signal on the cell surface is converted into a response from the cell. So here's kind of just a little exchange, or a little diagram of our yeast and how they kind of communicate. So you have mating type A, mating type alpha. Okay, a mating type A will secrete A factor, which is received by the alpha. Mating type alpha secretes the alpha factor, which is received by the A. This helps them find each other. They find each other and mate via fusing their plasma membranes and become an A alpha cell. Okay, so they use these factors, these chemical factors, to communicate and locate each other, and then to generate some kind of response. Similar pathways suggest that ancestral signaling molecules evolved first in prokaryotes and were modified later in eukaryotes. Okay, and like bacteria use signaling molecules to sense population density. They know when to grow, when to slow down, but it's really, you don't think about, bacteria as communicating with each other, but they most certainly do. Okay. Cells in a multicellular organism, of course, must communicate by talking to each other so that they can coordinate all of the different metabolic functions that are happening in an organism. And they communicate via chemical messengers. A couple ways they can do this. Animal and plant cells have junctions that directly connect the cytoplasm of adjacent cells. Okay. And this is part of local signaling. Local means close by. So they can have direct contact or cell-cell recognition. So let's look at, here's an example of some direct contact. Okay. Gap junctions between animal cells basically make the cells sort of share a cytoplasm, so chemical messengers can go straight through. Same thing with plasmodesmata in plant cells. Okay, and then here's cell-cell communication. This is how the white blood cells of your immune system communicate. One will kind of present a factor on the surface of the cell that binds to the surface of another cell and causes a reaction in that cell. And this is how your immune system works. It's really kind of cool. Okay. In other cases, animal cells use different local regulators that travel, so are chemical molecules that travel short distances. Okay, so there's local regulators, and then there's also long distance signaling. And long distance signaling can travel a very long distance. And what's primarily used for long distance signaling by both plants and animals are hormones. And I know you guys have heard of these. So hormones are long-distance communication molecules that help trigger signal transduction pathways, okay? And the ability of a cell to respond to one of these signals depends on whether or not it has a receptor on its surface, because we just did a whole bunch of stuff about the plasma membrane, and as we know, big things can't get in. But it turns out with these pathways, signal transduction pathways, big things don't need to get in. All right, so let's look here. So here's some local signaling. This is paracrine signaling between a secreting cell and a target cell, and they, again, just nearby, they'll release some local regulator. It just diffuses through the extracellular fluid to its target cell. Synaptic signaling, taking a nerve impulse and getting it from cell to cell, is also done this way by local signaling. So you'll have an electrical signal traveling along the nerve. That releases a neurotransmitter, which travels across the synapse and initiates a response in the next nerve. So that's local signaling. And then long distance signaling, okay, is where you'll have some kind of an endocrine cell. Let's say this is your pancreas. It secretes insulin, and that goes into your bloodstream, and then it circulates in your bloodstream and probably goes to a target cell, usually in the liver, and then it diffuses out and causes a reaction in the target cell. So that's long distance signaling, and it can be long distance. Like you can get a hormone secreted from, the anterior pituitary gland in your brain that will trigger production of a trigger reaction in your kidneys. So long distance. So there are three. I don't know why this is so tiny. There are three main stages of cell signaling, of getting that message to a cell and then getting the cell to do something about it. This guy discovered it. You don't need to know that. But what you do need to know is what he suggested. Cells receiving signals go through three processes. First process is reception of the signal. Second process is transduction of the signal, getting the message into the cell and to the target area. And then the third cell is a response. The signal causes some kind of response in the cell. It gets the cell to do something. So here's kind of a little graphic. Learn this graphic. It is important. Learn me. Okay. So here is reception. So you'll have a signaling molecule that will bind to a receptor on the cell surface. Look, it is a transmembrane protein. The binding of the receptor changes the conformation of the protein, changes its form, changes its function. It triggers a response inside the cell. We're getting the signal across the plasma membrane. The transduction of the signal, causes a series of relay molecules. And then eventually one of those relay molecules will activate a response. Okay, a lot of times the response is we're activating a gene activation. That gets the cell to do something we want it to do. Okay, but learn this graphic. Okay, that's all for our introduction to cell communication and signal transduction. And now after this, we're going to go through each of those steps. So each successive screencast will be one of those 3 steps: reception, transduction, and response.